Learn from those who've done it when it comes to maximising profits, even with the backdrop of a challenging high street. My name's Claire Bailey and I'm joined today by Kim Hulse. She's done an episode before, you may have heard it. So welcome, Kim.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Lovely. Well, today we're going to be sharing insights into some of the real businesses we've worked with who've made very simple changes that have actually all added up to huge value. And they're changes that pretty much any business could easily make too without too much investment. As a bit of background, Kim and I have spent a number of years working together, and we spent far more years than we'd care to admit working with retailers and consumer-facing businesses. And that ranges from delivering customer service to supply chain projects, store design to stock control, fixing issues and improving processes. So what we want to do is share our examples of things that genuinely have worked for real businesses, so that you can turn the tide on spiralling costs impacting the industry and make your 2026 a really great year. So, let's dive straight in. Kim, you go first. Let's hear about one of your case studies from a retail client and share some of the things that they did to make a real difference.
I'm going to talk about a sports shop. They loved the products they were selling. They're enthusiasts in sports. But that meant the range was really wide and the range needed more structure. There were so many amazing, brilliant things you could stock that sometimes it was a bit bewildering to select the product that was right for you. Brilliant brands, brilliant products, but we needed to curate it. So we looked at which brands to keep, which brands to discontinue, and again, curating the product range, making sure that what was in stock was right for the market size, the customers coming in, and ultimately the sales and margin that we wanted to achieve. We also talked to suppliers. It was quite a new shop, so relationships were really, really new. And it's sometimes quite daunting talking to suppliers. You think they hold all the cards, but working with the shop owner in talking to the suppliers, getting to know them, their brands, where their focus is, and sharing what our needs and aspirations were for the year, meant that we ended up with better payment terms. We had goals we could aim to. If we reached a certain volume in purchases, then we could release better cost prices. So we had an incentive to do really well. We created joint promotions with them and we got marketing support and reps out for an experience day, or from being a bit more open to conversation rather than going in and just being told this is what you're going to get. Other quick things, really, we built a good, better, best structure. We looked at making sure the best sellers were never out of stock, and also understanding with suppliers where we needed to put our money in terms of size runs, colorways, what would really work and what would really deliver for us. And then finally, we looked at promotions. What would work with the promotions that will drive sales and margin? Promotions, yeah, sometimes it's about stock clearance, but often it's about margin growth. So we worked on strategies to deliver that. So it's an accumulation of lots of things delivered in an integrated way.
I'll share one of mine next then. It's one of my favourites. It was a boutique in Lichfield, a high-end women's wear brand. They had quite a loyal customer base, mainly within the local catchment area. Although with it being relatively touristic, they did pick up other people as well. I mean, they had a remarkable 700,000 turnover from a small shop. And from the outside, it looked like it ought to be making a lot of profit. But the problem was, underneath, there were some issues in the way that their stock and ranges were managed, which meant that the owner was barely drawing a salary at all. Now, in terms of the backdrop, they had things like American vintage brand. That was their basics. Of course, they're quite high end, but it was things like jeans, jumpers, cardigans, vests, and they're kind of year-round products, seasonless staples. But unfortunately, due to the buying patterns and the reactive nature of buying, the owner kept running out. On the flip side, they had really high-end, high-fashion pieces. Certainly in Christmas and New Year, they were stocking things like Vivienne Westwood for party wear. I mean, beautiful products, very high ticket, but really dependent on the season. And after New Year's Eve, it was cost price plus VAT to clear. And that lost them a lot of margin or ended up with a lot of cash tied up in obsolete stock that they couldn't bring out the following year because obviously with it being a more fashion-led retailer, it had to be gone. They did have an EPOS, and what we did was I sat down with the lady and we looked at what she needed to ask of her data in order to make the decisions that would drive the business. So we reviewed the EPOS and it was full of thousands of reports. I mean, you could disappear into anything and everything, but there wasn't a clear suite of favourite reports that helped the day-to-day. So we set up a favourites folder of reports, and I told her to ignore all the other stuff unless she was bored and had insomnia, quite frankly, because it was just way too much. It was
They've gone mad.
it's a bit like Google Analytics, really. From that, once we were able to look at actual data that really mattered, and we did do a couple of custom reports, we were then able to look at stock profiles and immediately identified these problems of selling out of the basics and overstocking on the high fashion. So we're able to track the life cycle of the sell-through rates and identify both margin erosion from the heavy-duty clearance, but also lost sales opportunity from the period of out of stocks, because you could track the sales line and then it dipped to zero and then stock came back in and it came back up. So obviously you've missed a whole chunk of time there. That's evidentially lost money and potentially lost customers, because if they come and they expect to buy something and they don't, they leave and maybe they'll never come back. So that was part of it. And we rebalanced basic versus fashions. She was really scared about buying heavy. I explained to her that actually she was losing that much margin by not being in stock. If she was theoretically, in her mind's eye, overstocked, because these were relatively unseasonal products, it didn't really matter, but losing the sales did. We tightened up the intake planning on the seasonal stuff to create more of a when it's gone, it's gone. Similar to your sportswear retail, we spoke to the suppliers about phasing orders so we could have more frequent replenishment if something did go crazy. Like they had a couple of summer and winter autumn waves in cardigans and jumpers, and so they might suddenly become very popular and they wanted to know that they could top up. But yeah, effectively the results was there was an immediate turnover and margin uplift from full availability on the basics. That filled all the gaps of the out of stocks. There was a sense of urgency around the fashion, so people bought at full price because they knew if they didn't, they'd miss out. That in turn meant that there was a high sell-through rate. In fact, it sold well in advance of the end of season, but that was okay because that was what people wanted to know would happen, and it brought about much less clearance. And ultimately, at the end of the project, instead of making practically zero profitability and making no drawings on the business at all, they, in the first year, managed to go from nearly zero to 40,000 a year, and then that continued to grow as the processes became established. Since then, they've sold successfully because they've now got a profit profile that appeals to a buyer. So that's my example. Kim, have you got another one?
Yeah, it's one that you and I worked on, really, a gift retailer. They were really disappointed with sales. They had a lot that was great, but they just wanted everything reviewing to work out what they could do to drive sales and margin. So we started with an audit. We looked at their store layout and reimagined that for the way that the shopper would browse the store. And then we looked at their merchandising techniques, making sure that everything popped and looked good. Point of sale was lacking, both in terms of pricing and information. And you and I both know that customers will often walk out a store if they can't easily see the price rather than ask someone. So having the right information to help sell the product was critical. We made some recommendations for the shop window to make that passing footfall pause and actually come in. And we looked at their promotion plan and their pricing and promotion plan. There were some product ranges where the price architecture wasn't quite there, and a few tweaks meant that we could encourage people to trade up the range. We also introduced some bundle deals where there were quite low value items, and encouraging people to buy more with 3 for 2 really made a difference. There was also a bit of emotional attachment to some products. So we looked with a fresh pair of eyes on what the product was. We looked at the slow movers and questioned why they were staying. If they weren't adding to the narrative or the brand and they weren't adding to the bottom line, then we created a sale-through strategy to make space for products that really would contribute to that brand and to sales. Online, we reviewed their website. We treated that as a opportunity that really wasn't being harnessed at the moment. So we reviewed their products, their navigation, their SEO, and we made that traffic really surge forward and helped grow online sales as well as physical sales. Within 3 months, I'd seen a 25% uplift in footfall online, and we'd seen an increase in sales in store. And actually, the product range was simpler, the offer was simpler, and it was a nicer environment in store, a more engaging experience in store, which meant sales grew.
I mean, I seem to remember that we also looked at something that so many small businesses overlook, which is optimizing their Google business profile, so that when somebody searches for the thing that they want near them, they might come up at top of search, because Google business profile with the map is really powerful. And I seem to remember that helped drive the footfall too, because in a touristy gifting type environment, people don't necessarily know you're there, and they might go looking for the solution to their problem near them, which I think has been proven to be really popular term of search in the last year or so.
And local search is just growing and growing in importance. But a lot of us, we set up Google business listing and then we tick it as done and don't look at it again. And having that refresh using the fields that perhaps weren't there when you set the account up, or actually your product and your services have grown, you've got so much more you can tell. Definitely put it in your diary to review every quarter.
Yeah, I mean, that's powerful, isn't it? And it is proof in both of these cases that those small changes, well delivered, actually make real results. Which leads us on to another business that we both worked on. And it was something that I see quite often. The family business that had outgrown itself, and we see it all the time. Brilliant founders, loyal customers, decades of hard work and building something from the ground up. But because they started as entrepreneurs, they outgrow their own systems. And like I say, you and I both worked on this one.
Yes, it's a classic. We've always done it this way, trap. And sometimes it's a case of they really want different ways of working. And sometimes it's a little bit of reassurance that actually a lot of what you're doing is right, but amplified by a lack of structure and a management team who are creative and entrepreneurial, but don't necessarily have the disciplines in retail that you might want. You can really unlock another surge in sales growth by putting some of those processes and retail thinking into the team once they've got to that size where they really need to grasp that to do the next stage of growth.
Well, exactly. I mean, they'd done so well. They'd managed to grow considerably over the years. And I guess they invited us in to help them establish what was stuff they needed to keep and what was stuff that they needed to add, and establish those, I guess, professional processes, but not overburdening them with too much heavy corporate stuff. Because it has to be fit for purpose. They're still an independent, they're still a family business, but they'd achieved a £7 million turnover. And their ambition was to reach 70 million. And without professional processes that could scale with them, then that was never going to happen.
And actually, the areas we looked at and workshopped with the whole team over several intensive days looked at areas where some of it was about product management and marketing and retail knowledge, and giving them the insights and the decision frameworks to help them manage their range. So in examples, life cycle planning, understanding the life cycle stages of a product from introduction to decline to obsolescence. You manage your product differently. You apply different decisions to the buying phase, the stock management, the pricing, the promotions, how much you're investing in marketing, all changes at different life cycle stages. So we help them look at understanding how you could classify which life cycle stage a product was in, the signs that a product is shifting from one stage to the other, and generally what kind of decisions you might make for those kind of products in each of the life stages. And they found that invaluable. We also talked about range frameworks, the product range, some brilliant products in there, but talking about good, better, best, and how you can position your ranges against each other to give a narrative and to help the customer decide which is the best product for them by giving them options and comparisons, then it really helps a customer walk away with a product rather than being overwhelmed with too much choice.
What we found as we unravelled all of this, didn't we, was that actually it was inextricably linked to stock. They'd got containers on the water, they'd not got management processes in place to track the inbound delivery systems. So alongside the life cycle and the range, they hadn't got control of the supply chain. So they needed to look at processes and systems and communications, moreover, to manage the stock so that things were arriving in the proper flow. We saw a situation that had arisen whereby products that had been doing really, really well went out of stock for as much as 3 or 6 months. And then, of course, it came back in stock and the world had moved on.
Yeah, it's really hard. And it was interesting. So we talked about those Monday morning meetings, those range review meetings, and how different departments get involved in different stages so that we can avoid those major stockouts. And so that the marketing aren't creating a huge campaign, investing money into a campaign when actually the shipment's still on the water and is delayed. So working out how each team could bring their knowledge of what's actually happening and their insights and expertise, help them make better decisions on a company level rather than in a department level. We also talked about pricing architecture. Again, it's where are those sweet spots in terms of price points between good, better and best? Where are the price points that will encourage someone to trade up or add something else to basket? And again, they found that really helpful. When you've been in retail for quite a long time, I think sometimes you don't realise that there are promotional mechanics that you can use that are really advantageous, that sometimes if you're newer to retail, you don't necessarily reach and think about them. So we went through about 10 different ways we could use promotions with purpose, from focusing attention on key products to promotions that increase basket spend, promotions that fostered loyalty and increased repeat purchases, and promotions that actually drove margin because of how we managed the promotion that gave value to the customer, but also to the retailer.
Exactly. And I remember that talking to them, the one thing that they weren't joining together was understanding how they could drive a sales uplift and then drive perhaps a better price with the supplier, because they weren't having the meetings you talked about with your sportswear retailer with their suppliers. They weren't negotiating, they weren't doing forecasting, they weren't talking about phasing or shipping plan because they weren't really holding on to their data and understanding their goals. And obviously suppliers have a really big insight into the total market view, anonymized, but they can talk about trends and what they're seeing and so on. So one of the things that linked so well into this whole thing, because obviously everything of this is inextricably linked, was that they then sort of had that light bulb moment where supplier negotiations, going in prepared and sharing your data with them helps the supplier to be able to come back and say, oh, I wouldn't promote that then because actually from our global data, we would see an uplift here or there anyway. So it would be a waste of margin to promote. However, this product might see a dip at that time in its seasonality. So that might be a good time to promote. And it's that insight that you can get from really building those lovely relationships with your suppliers.
Absolutely. And your suppliers are your friends. My first question in any supplier meeting is, how's business? What's happening in the market? What can you share? And sharing your data and understanding it between you. They want you to grow. If you grow, they get more sales. Of course you should work together.
Exactly. I mean, they don't have shops of their own, do they? They need somebody to sell their stuff. And I think you touched on it, but when we did these sessions, what really became clear was that there'd been this fundamental breakdown in team communication because the team had grown so much. And there was also a lack of role clarity. In the early days, because they were a tiny business, first starting out, they were entrepreneurial. They could just gather around somebody's desk and have a chat, solve an issue and crack on. But that was now rather inefficient because there were too many involved in the process. And it wasn't the entrepreneurial quick chat and a fix. They were now at a scale which needed them to have clearer roles and, like you said, the meetings, the comm structure, and a rhythm and routine around team updates so everybody felt informed, valued, and a contributory part to everything that was going on. And what they weren't doing was looking at the right KPIs either. So they didn't really know what they should be measuring to know that things were going well. And I recall that when we set them up with sort of that meetings planner, sort of like the quick and dirty weekly round the table update with actions assigned to fix immediate issues, right through to more strategic senior management board level meetings around what the direction and purpose and future looked like. When we talked around stuff like that, I remember in the workshops, you could see this wave of relief coming over some of the faces when they suddenly realised this would help them move away from the panicky firefighting and confusion to something that was more clear and planned and calm and in control.
It was that rhythm of working, and it meant you could get the job done. You could go, actually, that's going to be a Monday morning conversation, or this is something I need to get up from my desk and go and talk to someone else about now. There was much more process. They knew what to raise when and where and with whom. And it just meant everybody felt more informed and just a more effective working relationship with everybody.
I mean, obviously, at a £7 million business, they're willing to invest in themselves for their growth. Not everybody's quite reached that stage yet, but at least it gives some kind of insight into the things that can be done to just take you forward to your next level of growth. It's worth thinking about what you do before you invest in certain activities and before you jump into any ideas of growth. Because in the way we did with these workshops, you need to make sure your house is in order. It's like, you have to have the proper ways of working. You have to think about growth, but it's going to potentially backfire if the basics aren't right.
So true. The basics every time have got to be nailed. If your offer's wrong, pricing's off, your shop's messy, e-commerce is clunky, slow. Why would you pay to drive footfall and traffic if you're not going to convert because your product price promotions offer isn't right? Things need to be done in a sequence. Number one, the right range. Have you got the right products with the right breadth and depth of stock for customers to buy? Just the right amount of choice. Are your pricings and promotions right? Making margin actually pays all your bills. So you've got to get your pricing promotions right to make sure you're bringing enough margin in to enable you to market yourself more, be on brand, be competitive, get your promotions right. And actually, we're more discerning customers than we've ever been. Service has to be right every time. And that's not just welcoming someone in store. The service goes right through to digital as well. Is your website easy to use? Are you finding things straight away? Is that delivery delivered on time? Is the information about returns easy to find? Your service has to be there every time. Of course, your shop environment needs to look and feel good. It needs to be somewhere people want to be in and spend time and dwell. It's got to be easy to navigate, and it's got to be easy to find the information you want to help you make that purchase. And I've touched on digitals, but number 5 would be get your digitals right. So that's your EPOS system. I still know shops that write down their sales on a pad using pen and paper. And I just can't wrap my head around how they know what's selling well, what they need to order more of, and how can they be responsive to emerging trends that the data will show you. So make sure you've got an EPOS system. You've got a website that's easy for you to manage, but also easy for the customer to buy from. Then, when your product pricing, promotions, service, in-store feel, and all your back room stuff is right, then you can tell the world you're here. Come and shop with us. Get a order wrong and you're investing time and money in marketing that's not going to convert into sales.
Yeah, that's really valuable because, there's so many places I've seen that it all looks great on paper, but you look on Google to look at their opening hours and you turn up because they say they're open and they're closed. How much of a service fail is that? There's one area, and I'm a particular geek on this, I have to admit, And it's about the supplier management, things like the stock levels, the supply chain. That's where your hidden profit levers are. But a lot of people don't think it's particularly sexy because it sounds analytical and data-driven, which is probably why I like it. It's a bit like doing a stock take. Nobody wants to do one, but it's really important. But I think you touched on it above as well. Some retailers behave as though they think the suppliers are their bosses, but actually they depend on the retailers to sell their products to consumers, unless, of course, they were also selling direct to consumer, but very few of them are. So I think that's such an important area that's well overlooked.
I was with a client this morning who promised to do a stock take first week of January, but they actually had a supplier with them at the time. And it's a two-way street because it gives the supplier an opportunity to find out directly from the coalface, what are customers thinking? What's the vibe on the high street? What's the consumer sentiment? And what are the shops telling them? So suppliers get information and useful facts from retailers as well. But what we want to focus on is making sure that that relationship is good. So we don't want unsuitable minimum order quantities where we're being asked to accept too much stock at the wrong time. Often suppliers will put pressure to accept deliveries early because it's out of the supplier's warehouse. And yes, it's as close to the customer as it can be. But as retailers, we want to manage our cash flow. So talking to your suppliers about what the minimum order quantities should be for you and what your delivery phase cycle should look like for you is really good so that you're managing that risk together and working through it together.
I think you can add to that in that a lot of the payment terms require smaller retailers to pay on dispatch, whereas they sell to bigger retailers on sort of 60 to 90-day terms. So actually, at least you've had some chance to sell some of the stock and bank some of the margin before you have to pay for it. But that's not the case with the smaller businesses. All the risk's on them. So being the supply chain geek, my advice is to master all the aspects that affect your stock levels, which will include things like intake planning. That comes to phasing deliveries. When do you actually, according to what you think your sales patterns will look like, need drops of stock? And talk to the suppliers about it. And if they have to send a minimum order quantity, because it's an economic order quantity, then discuss with them about some kind of preferential payment terms, because they're going to have to understand that that's more stock than you need. Then you also need to think about sell-through targets. So if a seasonal product, for example, and that applies to technology these days because there's always the next best thing in TVs and smartphones and laptops. So you need to know that you're going to be able to sell through before the next best thing lands so you don't end up with a load of clearance. So you need to think about what your targets are there. Sensible stock cover calculations. So understanding from the supplier's delivery lead times, I order on week 1 for delivery on week 2, or I order on week 1 for delivery on week 8. Therefore, you need to have different cover calculations in place so that you don't go out of stock between deliveries. Then that links to helping the suppliers understand why you need phased buying. And this is something you need to touch on in any kind of negotiation to talk about. Actually, in some cases, it might be worth paying a little more for the extra delivery drop in order to have a smaller and more just-in-time delivery in order to keep your cash flow in the business and minimize risk. Or for basic products that are everyday, day in, day out, not particularly seasonal, it might be worth agreeing that you'll take a larger order, which ties up your cash flow and your capital, but on condition that there's a discount. And just one renegotiated minimum order quantity, whether it's up or down and according to the price you get, might be able to outperform marketing campaigns in terms of things like injecting cash flow and the cost of the risk of out of stock and obsolescence.
Absolutely. Supply chain isn't glamorous. It's where margin can leak.
Like me.
Yeah, you got to fix your timing, your phasing, replenishment. It means you can get where you need to be, but keep on top of the data. The data will tell you how you need to plan.
So from that, obviously there's a lot of lessons learned and advice there. I'm thinking now, we're not far off January. We've got to get through Christmas, but January is one of the best months to reset perceptions. It's when everybody joins the gym and makes resolutions. New year, new me. New year, new business. New year, new focus. New year, new goals. All that jazz. So, what about low cost, high impact ideas and making those small changes that are going to make a strong impact? Not trying to do everything at once and suffering overwhelm. That's the sort of thing we want people who are listening to this today, who perhaps have independent high street, consumer facing businesses across the board. That's what we want them to think about, isn't it?
So why don't we take turns? I'll give you one about visibility, clarity, and credibility, and that's curb appeal. Make sure your windows are clean, your signage is there, you've got a lovely, brilliant shop window. Get rid of old point of sale in your shop window that isn't relevant anymore. Clean, tidy, brilliant design. You've instantly got a shop that's signalling confidence.
I actually remember seeing Valentine's promotions that ended on the 14th of February still in a store on the 21st. And I just thought, you can't be bothered to change your signage. But, banging on the same drum for your visibility, and I may have mentioned it before, the Google Business Profile, it's basically a digital shop front. You've got the opportunity to put things like hours, if there's parking, photographs of product, photographs of the team, because people buy from people, teasers, you can put the right content in, you can encourage reviews, have FAQs. It's really rich. And that helps with visibility and trust and credibility to bring people to the store.
And once you've got them to the door, why not take the opportunity to reset your layout? Obviously, you've got housekeeping, you're stripping out the Christmas clutter, you're separating clearance from your new products, you're refreshing hotspots, and you've actually maybe got some decompression zones. Think about, what have your customers asked over the last couple of months? If they're all asking, where are the jelly cats? I can't find them. And that's telling you, you need to bring them out a bit more and really showcase them. So reset your layout, but also think about how customers are shopping and what clues they're giving you for how you can set it out differently. Review what sold and why. So a short, sharp look at stock. What's flown out? What's stuck? Which suppliers helped and which suppliers worked? Note it all down now while it's still fresh. Get your team to give their insights too.
And leading on from that, actually, the stuff that's stuck and the stuff that flew links to your stock and cash flow reset. If there's stuff that's still stuck, that's a bit of a tongue twister. You need to clear those slow movers. And I actually have a view that to a point, clearance is expected, Boxing Day sale and so on. But a week or so into January, there is the potential to distract a possible full price shopper from spending at full price by that stuff. So perhaps put it on an eBay clearance channel or wherever else that you could potentially consider to take it away from the shop floor at a point in time, so it isn't distracting people from spending on the new range, the new product, and at full price. The other thing I've mentioned, phasing intake, avoid panic buying. I mean, other than in the case where it's high season, high fashion, high cost, like the Vivienne Westwood example, you don't want people to think, well, I've got to buy it now because it won't be available. You want people to feel like when I go here, they always have what I need if it's a core basic. And all of those activities are going to free up cash for backing the winners that make you the most money.
And then January, not every retailer is absolutely set on Christmas and seasonal, but a lot are. But January is a great time to reset that team focus. So go back and have a look at the why. Why are you here? Why are you helping your customers? Why have you got the products and services that you do offer? Deliver them with conviction. Just have a team huddle. And then finally, communication. Focus on telling your customers what's new in store. Give them some clarity on what your brand's about, what's coming up. It's not about, here's the next discount and we're on clearance. It's about, this is what we've got. We've got something that resonates with you that will help you enjoy what you enjoy doing or help you solve a problem.
It's not about having deep pockets. It's about having the time to take stock of where you are and where you want to be, which actually leads us on to, once January's sorted, what actually is going to matter most for 2026 and ongoing in terms of how retailers tackle the prevailing backdrop of let's face it, some challenging economic circumstances.
Times are tough. I see posts like, heads down, let's see you on the other side. And it really is a case of get your head down, get your basics nailed, product, price, promotion, and integration. Make sure your digital and your physical stores work in tandem so that you are working really well and delivering as much value as you can from the messages you're putting out across the channels. Deliver real consistency. Make sure all the areas, in-store, online, social media, Google business listing, they all tell the same story, and deliver it always with the same exceptional service. And even if you don't feel that confident, it's that fake it till you make it. Sometimes people can smell confidence and sense confidence. So present that to the customer and they'll be confident too. It's a bit contagious, isn't it?
I mean, actually, shall we dive into some top tips and top takeaways? And you go first.
Yep. So for January, I said get the basics right. So that's pricing architecture with purpose. Your good, better, best pricing, having margin that works with you, having logic behind your margin. Plan your promotions and understand what will trigger you going into promotion so that you're not just going into reduced prices because it feels a little bit slow. Look at your life cycle discipline and always, always offer value to your customer.
For me, it's about the geek stuff. Supplier management is a kind of a make or break thing, especially when prices are under so much pressure. So looking at the lead times, which leads, of course, to stock profiles, the minimum order quantities. Bear in mind, delivery costs are rising. So if it's a low-risk product, fewer deliveries of higher volume, if you've got storage space, is worthwhile. But negotiate and phase in order to protect your cash flow and your availability so that customers will always find what they want to buy in your store. Which kind of leads into another hot potato for me is data-driven decision-making. If I said this once, I've said it probably 200 million times, if there's been enough time in my life to have done that. Having the weekly KPIs, the stuff that you have to look at and just have a quick check. And if your EPOS allows it, having exception reports that say, if it goes 15% either side of my target, I want an immediate alert. Something clever like that, but it's not that complicated in most modern systems. And it's easy for your supplier to set up if you don't know how to as a one-off. But also looking at monthly stock performance reviews, your margin, looking at supplier performance, things like complete and on-time delivery. It's not about having vanity dashboards that say, oh, aren't we brilliant? It's about actually picking the KPIs that provide you with the levers that you can pull to change something that makes a positive difference.
Absolutely. They tell a story which will lead to action. So my suggestion for 2026, following on from that, is collaboration, not isolation. Today, my local retailers, I've got a ladies' wear shop collaborating with a lingerie shop. They're doing a joint 2-day collaboration, which is just phenomenal. They're both using each other's customer base for cross-pollination. It'll be a triple win for both of them and the consumers. So look at landlords, local makers, your community, any organisations that bang the drum about your high street, and your neighbouring retailers. Collaborate absolutely in 2026. Have courage in terms of retail competency. Get making those decisions. If something's failing, cut it. Invest where products are working and push it. Have a look at what you're focusing on and maybe do less things well rather than spreading yourself too thin. So price properly, evolve deliberately, and where you can, stand out in your marketing, be confident and try and stand out from the crowd, because being courageous in your decisions and in your marketing will pull attention in from customers. And then finally, plan ahead, even if it's actually, I'm only going to promote if sales do this. Have a think about what you're going to be promoting, plan your window displays, and think about what products you're bringing in when.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the quieter months when everyone's paying off their Christmas credit card debts are the perfect time to plan ahead. An area which I know you and others of our team do a lot of work with our clients with is defining the promotional calendar, whereby you look at the year ahead, you look at things like school holidays, major sporting events, religious festivals, local activities, and so on, and map all that to what matters to your customer and help to be able to then design things like events, window refreshers, even store layout and social and email content, because that all then flows through into what you've been saying about you don't have to discount to promote. You can spotlight, highlight, or just put something in the window or double face it, which means to the non-retail lingo speakers, you might have a product on the shelf in one area, but you might have it on a shelf in another area with a complementary product or in a very highly visible place. I think that getting that right keeps that excitement and it keeps you front of mind. And people will start to say, whenever I go there, it's always really interesting. They've always got something new to look at.
And it helps you plan. Whether you're ordering your own stock or you've got someone in the team can do that. If you can see in your promotional calendar that you're going to do a huge promotion on this product in April, you can make sure you've got your stock in place to do that, and you can sell through another product in the lead up to it. So you've got the merchandising space to actually put that promotion on. So it's thinking ahead and having a plan, knowing you've got purpose that will give you confidence in your plans as well. And promotions, as you say, aren't always discounts. It can be trading up, it can be spotlights, it can be bundles to boost basket size, themed product groups, loyalties to bring customers back in a little bit more frequently. Clearance is separate. That's about cutting deep discounts to clear the stock quickly, to generate cash flow that you can put into new lines, to clear space that your new products can take to sell. So for quiet periods, it's about strategy. Review your range, review your promotions, identify your suppliers, look at your trade shows so you can look at sourcing trips. Have a look at how your promotions, your displays, your buying and your marketing will all align so that when you're busy in that mid and peak season, you're leaning on the plans you've already put in place.
100%. And I mean, I know, Kim, you've said things before, evolution beats revolution. It's a cliched saying, but it's actually very valuable. From your point of view, why is that so key?
Small, regular improvements add up. Sometimes we like change, but we're creatures of habit. So if we're slowly evolving as a retailer, then we're bringing our consumers with us. And those small changes, we kind of accept them as the retailers make them. So small, regular improvements means you're constantly changing. You're constantly scanning the environment to see where the next opportunity or next idea might be. So constant adaptation is key. Adapting to consumer behaviour, to new digital tools, to what's happening in the community. Retail, the only constant in retail is change. Retail is always changing, always has and always will. So keep that steady innovation and evolution going. Keep up with your market and your customers. And that consistent understanding where your retailer is, understanding your brand and what you do, and adapting to current needs, that'll build resilience into your business.
I mean, there are some things in retail that will never change. People want to buy things. The things that we sell need to represent value, quality, and appeal to the people that want to buy from us. And jumping on the bandwagon of the next big thing with technology isn't necessarily going to fix the fact you're out of stock. So the core basics we've talked about will never change per se. The way we go about them might. But yes, I do believe in incremental change and the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, the continuous improvement and the avoidance of wasted activity. Well, I think that's us done for today. Kim, thank you. Honestly, I think this sums up a fairly significant part of everything we've ever learned from fixing retail, although there's a lot deeper to go into. Fixing retail isn't magic. It isn't theory. It's just about making the right decisions at the right time in the right order to deliver results. So I would urge anybody listening in the sector to pick just one thing from today. One thing, a small win, an overdue improvement, and then take another one and another one. One change at a time, and that will give a cleaner, clearer, confident start to 2026. And like you say, retail rewards momentum, not perfection. So start small, start now, and build from there. Any final words from you, Kim?
You've summed it up beautifully. Keep momentum, have confidence in your decisions, and get your basics right.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again. We've been Claire Bailey, the retail champion, joined by Kim Hulse, and you've been listening to Retail Reckoning.